Hey Brainiacs, welcome back to another episode of the Biology Breakdown. I'm your host, Cooper Pittman, and today we're going to talk about the structure of the cell membrane and transportation. So first, let's talk about why this actually matters. Cell membrane structure and transport are crucial to all cells because they control what goes into the cell and what comes out. This keeps nutrients inside, gets rid of waste, and maintains what we call homeostasis so our cells and us can thrive and function properly. Now, let's talk about the structure of the cell membrane. The most important part is the phospholipid bilayer. As the name suggests, it's made of two layers. Each phospholipid has a hydrophilic phosphate head that loves water and faces outwards, and two hydrophobic tails that hate water and face inwards. Since our bodies are made up about 60% water, this setup makes a lot of sense. These phospholipids line up all around the cells, forming a barrier where the heads face the watery areas in and outside of the cell, and the tails face each other in the middle. Once this is all put together, the cell is contained and protected. Now that we have the basic structure, let's talk about what's embedded inside of the cell membrane, also known as the fluid mosaic model. First, cholesterol. Cholesterol is a type of steroid that helps to regulate the fluidity of the cell membrane, making sure that everything is flowing just right. Next are carbohydrates. These stick out on the outside of the cell membrane and are used for cell identification, basically making sure there aren't any foreign cells or substances sneaking around in our body. Lastly, we have proteins, which are arguably the most important part. There are two main types, integral proteins and peripheral proteins. Integral proteins go all the way through the cell membrane and protrude from each side with one long hole in the middle, so larger molecules such as glucose can go through it. The next part is peripheral proteins, which sit on the surface and help with communication. All of this together makes the membrane functional and flexible. Now, for a quick recap, because we've learned so much information, phospholipids form the base, proteins help with transport and communication, cholesterol controls fluidity, and carbohydrates help with identification. Kind of like bouncers at a club, making sure nothing sketchy gets in. This leads us to selective permeability. The membrane gets to pick and choose what enters the cell. Small, non-polar molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide pass through easily. Bigger or charged molecules like ions need protein channels to get into the cell. One protein channel that is special is an aquaporin, which is used specifically for water. Even though water is polar, our bodies need it everywhere, so aquaporins allow water to move quickly while still keeping things balanced. Now, let's discuss types of transport. First, let's talk about passive transport. Passive transport doesn't require energy or ATP. Molecules move from high to low concentration until equilibrium is reached. Think of it like rolling down a hill. You don't have to work for it. The force pushes you down yourself. Diffusion is a type of passive transport, and it allows small non-polar molecules to pass directly through the membrane. Facilitated diffusion, another type of passive transport, helps large polar molecules move through it using proteins, but it still doesn't use energy. Osmosis is a passive transport specifically for water. This leads us to our next topic, tenacity. Tenacity describes how the concentration of solutes outside of a cell affect the movement of water across the membrane. In a hypotonic solution, water is going to rush into the cell and make it swell. In a hypertonic solution, water leaves the cell, leaving it to shrivel and shrink. In an isotonic solution, the ideal solution, water moves evenly and the cell stays the same size. Tenacity matters because too much or too little water can seriously damage cells and their function. Now remember our friend passive transport? Well, let's get to our friend's enemy, active transport. It's the exact opposite of passive transport. It requires energy. usually ATP, because molecules are moving from low concentration to high concentration, basically climbing up a hill. A major example is the sodium-potassium pump. It moves sodium out of the cell and potassium into the cell, which is essential for nerve signaling and muscle function. It uses ATP to change the entire shape of the pump and move the ions where they need to go. Now, let's get into bulk transport. As we've talked about, some things are just too big to pass through a cell membrane, but some things are ginormous, and we have to use something called bulk transport. The bulk transport uses vesicles to move large materials through the cell membrane. Endocytosis brings materials into the cell, while exocytosis brings them out of the cell. These processes are used for proteins, hormones, and even waste. Now let's connect this to some real-life situation. For example, IV fluids are designed to match the tenacity of your blood so your cells don't swell or shrink. Nerve and muscle function also rely on ion gradients, maintained by active transport like the sodium-potassium pump. This stuff isn't just in our textbooks. It's a real-world biology. Now, it's time to take some calls. Hello, what's your question?
Is osmosis basically water chasing solutes?
Great question, but no. Water isn't chasing solutes, it's moving to balance concentration. So you're telling me the cell membrane isn't a rigid wall? Correct. It's flexible and dynamic, allowing proteins and lipids to move while still protecting the cell.
Facilitated diffusion doesn't use energy even though it says facilitated?
It's still passive transport and doesn't require ATP. We take these calls because not everyone is comfortable speaking up, and clearing up misconception helps everyone understand how the membrane works. To sum all of this craziness up, the cell membrane is essential for life. Its structure, a phospholipid bilayer with proteins, cholesterol, and carbohydrates, makes it flexible and functional. Transport methods like passive transport, active transport, and bulk transport help to maintain homeostasis and allow cells to survive, communicate, and respond to their environments. That's all I have for you today, brainy biologists, but tune in next week when we talk about hand sanitizer is the devil and makes superbugs and will eventually end the world.